The wind tore across the Montana mountains like something alive, something wounded and furious. Snow ripped sideways through the granite ridges, a blinding white curtain that swallowed sound and sense. Jedediah Holt knew storms better than he knew people. They followed rules. They announced themselves in pressure shifts, in the way the pines groaned, in the metallic taste the air took on. But this one? This storm was different. It howled like it had a purpose, like it was hunting. Inside his small log cabin, a 20-foot square of timber, stone, and stubborn survival, Jed worked his carving knife through the grain of a wolf figurine. The fire cracked, shadows jumping across the rough-hewn walls. He had lived alone for 15 winters, seen more storms than he could count, buried memories deeper than the snow outside. At 39 he looked older, gray streaking through long dark hair, beard thick, lined face weathered by cold and grief. Solitude had become both punishment and refuge. Thunder, his massive black stallion, shifted in the lean-to stable. The horse felt storms the way other creatures sensed predators. Jed set down the half-finished wolf and pulled on his buffalo coat. He needed to check the stable, check the door, check the world. Routine kept the dark thoughts at bay. He stepped outside, and the wind hit him like the palm of God. Snow stung his face, snatching his breath. As he crossed to the stable, something prickled beneath the roar of the storm, a sound that didn't belong. Not wind, not beast, a sound faint as a broken prayer. A cry. Jed froze. He turned his head, listening past the storm's teeth. There it was again, swallowed quickly by the gale, a strange, thin wail carried up the mountain. A human sound. Damnation, he muttered. Nobody should have been caught on the ridge tonight. The stage road below was dangerous on sunny days. No sane driver would attempt it in a blizzard. But that cry, it wasn't the wind. Thunder snorted and pawed at the snow, agitated. Jed's jaw tightened. He didn't want involvement. He didn't want reminders of the world he'd left behind. But storms didn't cry out for help. People did. And Jed Holt had never been able to ignore the dying. He saddled Thunder in silence, movements crisp despite the cold numbing his fingers. The horse balked at first. Storm spooked him too, but Jed's firm hand and low voice settled him. When Thunder pushed into the blizzard, the snow swallowed them immediately, visibility barely a horse length ahead. But Jed knew the mountain by feel. Every dip, every boulder, every stretch where wind cut different. He rode by instinct, following the faint, impossible cry the storm nearly devoured. It took nearly an hour before Thunder halted abruptly, snorting hard. Jed slept his gaze across the slope, and there, through whipping snow, lay a shape too still to be anything but trouble. The stagecoach was on its side, half buried against a rock outcrop. The horses were down, frozen stiff, bodies glazed in ice. The driver hung limp from the seat, neck bent wrong. Jed's gut twisted. This wreck wasn't an accident. Something had forced that coach off the road, something desperate. He dismounted, rifle slung over his back. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he moved through the wreckage. A man in city clothes lay half-covered, a guard farther off, both lifeless. Packages, letters, and splintered wood littered the slope. It was death scattered like confetti. Then, soft, muffled, came that cry again. He pivoted fast, eyes scanning. A drift near a boulder seemed wrong. Snow pressed in an unnatural mound. He knelt, brushed snow aside with bare hands, ignoring the sting. Cloth emerged, deep green wool, a cloak, a hand, a woman. A large woman by the weight of the drift and the fullness of her figure. Her skin was dark, deep, rich brown against the snow, and her thick black braids were strewn across her shoulders beneath the frost. She was dressed for travel, not for Montana's cruelty. Her cheeks were ice-burned, her lips pale. He pressed fingers to her throat. Nothing. Then, faint, so faint he almost imagined it, a pulse fluttered beneath chilled skin. He should have walked away. He told himself that while scooping her into his arms. He told himself again while struggling to lift her onto Thunder's back. She was soft, solid, heavy with curves that made the balancing awkward in the saddle. Her head lolled against his chest as he wrapped his coat around her and held her tight against him. "You're trouble," he whispered against the wind. "I can feel it." But Thunder didn't hesitate. The horse charged uphill through drifts that could have swaddled them both. Jed held her close, sharing what warmth he had, urging the stallion faster. Her breaths came shallow, each one weaker. "Don't you die," he growled into her hair. "Not after I decided to care." By the time they reached the cabin, his arms were numb from holding her. He kicked the door shut behind him and laid her before the fire. He stripped her frozen clothes, practicality overriding modesty, and wrapped her in his thick buffalo robe. Steam rose from the garments he hung to dry. The scent of lavender oil clung stubbornly to the damp fabric, a strange sweetness in a room built by loneliness. He knelt beside her, chest heaving, snow melting in his beard. "Who in God's mountain are you?" he muttered. She didn't answer. She only breathed, barely. And Jed Holt, mountain hermit, storm-hardened ghost of a man, realized something with a jolt of unwelcome clarity. He wasn't letting her die. Not this woman. Not tonight. Not in his cabin. Everything changed the moment he carried her inside. The fire snapped and hissed as melted snow dripped from the woman's clothing hung across chairs and pegs. Jedediah Holt sat on the worn floorboards beside her, elbows on his knees, jaw clenched tight. He'd already wrapped her in his buffalo robe and fed the flames until the cabin glowed with heat, but worry gnawed at him with sharp, unwelcome teeth. He hadn't cared this way for anyone in 15 years. He didn't want to start again. Not now, not with a stranger the mountains had spit into his path. But the woman lay still as stone, breath shallow, lashes unmoving against her dark cheeks. The cold had stolen her color, even her lips trembled without opening. Even unconscious, she had a presence, full-bodied, soft, heavy in a way that reminded him of warmth and life, not fragility. Her curves pressed against the robe, generous and unmistakable. A woman built for softness and laughter, not suffering in a snowstorm. "What the hell were you doing out there?" he muttered to the room. She didn't answer. Storms howled, people died, and the mountain didn't care. But he did. Against his better judgment, he did. Hours slid past. Jed stirred the venison stew, checked the drying clothes, checked her breathing again and again and again. Each time he touched her wrist searching for a pulse, he felt something tighten inside him, something he didn't trust. When dusk crept across the window, she stirred. A faint twitch beneath her eyelids, a faint moan. Her fingers curled as if reaching through a dream. Jed froze. Then she inhaled sharply, choked, eyes flying open in panic. Green. Her eyes were the color of moss after rain, sharp, wild, confused. She saw him and screamed. Her voice split the air like a gunshot. She scrambled backward, pressing the buffalo robe against her chest, staring at him as though he were a wolf crouched to pounce. Jed lifted both hands slowly. "You're safe." "Don't touch me," she cried, pulling the robe tighter. What have you... Where are my clothes?" "You were freezing," he said, voice low and steady. "Your clothes were soaked through." Her eyes flicked to the garments steaming near the fire, then back to him. You undressed me?" she whispered, horrified. "I kept you alive," Jed countered. The woman's breath came in ragged bursts. Her body shivered, not from cold now, but shock. She was large and strong-looking, yes, but fear softened people, made them small. Her shoulders shook as she pressed herself against the log wall, every instinct braced to flee. Jed rose slowly to his feet. Her gaze followed every inch of the movement. "You're in my cabin," he said, quiet but firm. "Name's Jedediah Holt. Found you in the snow beside a coach wreck. You were the only one still breathing." She blinked rapidly, once, twice. Her lips parted, then trembled shut. I saw the confusion hit her like a blow. Everyone is gone?" she whispered. I nodded. "I'm sorry." Her eyes glossed with unshed tears. Then came the crack in her voice. "The child, the boy, he was traveling with us. Did you see?" Jed exhaled slowly. He chose honesty over mercy. "I saw him." That was enough. Her head bowed. Her shoulders crumpled. A sob tore from her throat, raw and shaking, nothing gentle or polite about it. She cried like someone who had learned too often that survival demanded silence, until suddenly silence was no longer possible. Jed stood helplessly, hands hanging at his sides. He had no practice comforting anyone anymore. He had no soft words. Comfort died with Mary. So he did the only thing he trusted. He gave her space. When the storm inside her finally quieted, she wiped her cheeks with a trembling hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice raucous. "I didn't mean to. I don't even know your name." "Jed," he said. "And you are—" A beat of hesitation, then softly, "Amara." Her voice held a depth that matched her figure, warm, solemn, full-bodied. "Amara Dubois." Jed nodded once. Her name settled in the room like a truth that belonged. Amara pulled the robe around herself more securely and lifted her chin. There was dignity in the gesture, even bare-legged and shaken. She said, "Thank you," though her tremor in her voice betrayed how wary she remained. "Thank you for rescuing me, even if the circumstances are indecent." Jed's eyebrow twitched. "Indecent is dying in a snowbank." The faintest breath of a laugh escaped her. He felt its warmth far too strongly. She shifted, trying to sit straighter. Can I have something else to wear?" He cleared his throat. "I'll get you clothes." He moved to the trunk beneath his bed, pulling out a flannel shirt and wool trousers, worn, patched, but clean. When he returned, she reached for them hesitantly, careful to keep the robe over her chest. They both pretended the moment wasn't awkward. He gave her privacy by stepping outside to check thunder. The cold slapped him again, a reminder of everything harsh outside, everything fragile inside. He leaned on Thunder's warm flank, breath clouding in the frigid air. "I can't control myself," he muttered bitterly. "Hell, I can't even control my thoughts." The horse flicked an ear, unimpressed. When Jed returned, Amara stood by the fire in his shirt and trousers, both stretched snug across her generous curves. The flannel strained over her breasts, the trousers tugged tight across her hips and thighs. She crossed her arms self-consciously, but she looked sturdy, grounded, alive. She looked like someone the mountain would not break easily. Her green eyes met his. "Thank you. Again." Jed swallowed hard. Something dangerous flickered between them, something neither of them asked for, something he didn't trust himself with. He tore his gaze away. "Eat," he said roughly. "Storm's getting worse. You'll need strength." Amara sat slowly, hands steadying the bowl. Jed watched her from across the fire, watched the way she held herself, watched the quiet determination beneath the fear, and he realized the storm outside wasn't the only one he had to worry about. The storm inside had just begun.
Morning crept into the mountains as a pale, reluctant glow. The storm had not stopped. It only paused, catching its breath like a beast preparing to lunge again. Jedediah Holt stood by the cabin door, studying the sky the way a man studies a loaded gun. Clouds massed thick and low. Wind slid across the ridge in long, warning strokes. It would not let them out any time soon. Behind him, the soft rustle of movement signaled Amara rising from the straw mattress. Jed turned just enough to see her descend the ladder with cautious hands on the rungs. She moved stiffly, her body still carried the exhaustion of cold nearly claimed. His clothes, flannel and wool, draped awkwardly over her full figure, but she wore them with dignity. Even with her braids half loosened and her cheeks still tender from frostbite, she looked like someone who expected to be treated with respect. Jed wasn't used to company, much less a woman like her. Large, dark-skinned, striking, undeniable. She filled the room with her presence in a way that made the cabin seem smaller. He didn't know how to manage that. He barely managed himself. "Good morning," she said softly, voice sanded raw by yesterday's grief. Jed grunted something that might have been a greeting and handed her a tin cup of bitter black coffee. She accepted it with both hands, sipping carefully, her nose wrinkled at the taste. "You drink this by choice?" she asked, eyebrows lifting. "It's warm." "So is swamp water," she said, and then, as if surprised by her own boldness, added, "Thank you, anyway." A corner of his mouth twitched. He smothered it quickly. He had to keep his distance. The mountain demanded it. His past demanded it. Breakfast was simple: cornmeal mush and strips of smoked venison. Amara ate slowly at first, as though measuring her appetite in front of him. But hunger eventually overcame politeness, and her pace quickened. It struck him then. She was not delicate, not fragile. She carried herself like a woman who had lived through enough that she didn't pretend at dainty. She didn't need delicate. She needed truth. And Jed was a man made entirely of rough truths. When they finished eating, Amara glanced toward the window. Snow drifted softly now, but the sky churned. After a long moment, she asked, "How long do storms like this last?" "A day, sometimes a week. It depends on the mountain's mood." Her face tightened with something close to fear, and then steadied into resolve. "Then teach me what I need to know." "To do what?" "To survive here, with you." Jed's breath caught, though her tone held no flirtation, only practical determination. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "That's not what I said." Her eyes lifted to his, green and unflinching. "If the storm lasts, I should learn to help instead of taking up space. Teach me something useful." Most women Jed had known wouldn't ask that. They'd wait, helpless, expecting rescue. But this woman, this curvy, stubborn, Boston-born stranger, had steel beneath the softness. He nodded once. "All right. Start with kindling." Her first swing with the hatchet nearly toppled her. Jed caught the handle mid-arc before it clipped her shin. "You'll take your foot off that way." Amara blew out a frustrated breath. "Then show me properly." He stood behind her, too close for comfort, too close for sense, but necessary. He placed his hands over hers on the hatchet handle. Her warmth seeped through his calloused fingers, her breath brushing his forearm as she exhaled. She was solid, curved, warm, and far too much temptation for a man who'd sworn off the world. "Feet shoulder-width apart," he murmured, his voice turning rough. "Use your weight. Don't just swing with your arms." She adjusted. The movement pressed her back to his chest. Accidental. Innocent. Devastating. Jed's throat tightened. He stepped back sharply before he did something foolish, something unearned. "Try again," he said, without looking at her. This time she swung cleaner. The wood split with a satisfying crack. Her face lit with triumph. "I did it!" "Don't celebrate yet," he said.
The warmth tugged at his voice. "You need a day's worth at least." "Then I'll do it," she said simply. And she did. Sweaty, breathless, but unyielding. By the time midday light dimmed into storm gray, she'd earned a pile of kindling respectable enough for any mountain homesteader. Inside the cabin again, Amara massaged her aching palms. "My hands are going to blister." "Blisters mean you're trying." "Is that mountain wisdom?" "It's survival." Something softened in her expression, not pity, but understanding. "You've survived alone a long time." Jed stiffened. "Long enough. Long enough to forget how to let someone help," she said quietly. He looked away, jaw tightening. "Long enough to know people die." Silence folded between them. Not sharp, not cold. Heavy. Meaningful. Amara touched the bandaged thumb she'd cut yesterday while carving. "Teach me the knife again," she said. "I'll be careful." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to keep distance. But she held the wood with such earnest concentration that he found himself sitting beside her, firelight warming their joined shadows. "Hold it like this," he said, guiding her fingers. Their hands brushed, just a graze, barely contact. But Amara inhaled sharply, and Jed's pulse stumbled. He pulled back abruptly, heat crawling beneath his beard. "Enough carving for today." A faint smile touched her lips, not mocking, knowing. If she noticed how rattled he was, she didn't say it. Instead, she asked gently, "Why did you help me, Jed?" "There was no one else left to help," he muttered. "That's not the reason," she said softly. He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. Because the answer was simple, dangerous, and truer than anything he'd spoken in years. He hadn't been able to control himself, not from the moment he heard her cry. And the mountain, silent witness that it was, seemed to know it too. Outside, the storm gathered strength again. Inside, in a cabin too small for the distance he needed, Jed felt something more treacherous than any blizzard, stirring inside him. Something he no longer knew how to fight.
The storm returned with a vengeance by evening, shaking the cabin walls as if determined to pry them apart. Snow hissed against the glass like 1,000 whispered warnings. Jedediah Holt worked silently at the table, whittling a handle for a trap spring, but his hands weren't steady. Not tonight. Across the room, Amara Dubois sat near the fire, her legs crossed beneath the oversized trousers he'd given her. The firelight painted her skin in warm amber, catching on the soft curves of her arms, the fullness of her hips, the loose strands of hair that framed her round face. She was beautiful in a way that made Jed's chest ache, deep, solid, alive. He tried not to look. He failed often. Every moment they shared this cabin tightened something in him. Every laugh she tried to hide, every sound of her moving through his space, every time her eyes lingered too long, he felt it like a pull in his ribs. He didn't want this, didn't trust it, didn't trust himself. "Storm's not letting up," she said quietly, her gaze drifting toward the window. "No," Jed replied. "So we're stuck a while longer." "That's how storms work." She gave him a dry smile. "You don't talk much, do you?" "Talking wastes breath." "And risking frostbite doesn't?" The faintest huff escaped him. She counted it as a victory. He could tell by the way her eyes mourned. Damn woman noticed everything. She resumed carving the small bird he'd coached her through. Her thumb bandage had loosened, but she worked carefully, focused. It should have been peaceful. It should have been fine. But the cabin felt too small tonight,
Every breath of her seemed to fill the room. Every flicker of firelight revealed something new about her. Strength, softness, defiance, and temptation. He wanted distance, but he couldn't stop watching her. The way her brow furrowed, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. Those generous curves moved under his shirt, too tempting for a man trying to keep himself caged. Finally, she set the wood down and looked at him directly. "Jed, we need to talk." "No, we don't." "Yes," she insisted, rising to her feet. He stiffened. "Sit back down." She crossed her arms. "Make me." His carving knife froze mid-stroke. Her challenge hung in the air, electric. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "What you won't," she shot back. "Facing what's happening between us." "Nothing is happening." She stepped closer. "You know that's not true." Jed shot to his feet, the chair scraping behind him. "You think because we've been stuck in a cabin together a few days?" "I think," she interrupted, voice low, steady, "that you look at me like you're afraid of what you feel." Jed's pulse thudded painfully. "You don't know anything about it," he growled. "Then tell me," she took another step. "Tell me why you can't even look at me without flinching." "I'm not flinching," even as he took a small step back. She followed him like a storm following heat. "You barely sleep. You barely eat. You avoid sitting too close." Her eyes held his without fear. "You're terrified of me." His eyebrows shot up. "Terrified of you?" "Yes." She stopped only inches from him. "Because you feel something, and you don't want to." His breath hitched. Her presence pressed against him, not touching, but close enough that her warmth seeped into him. Close enough to break him open. "Amara," his voice rasped a warning. "Jed." He closed his eyes. He had kept walls up for 15 years, walls built from grief, guilt, mountains, winter. She had walked into his life, and without even trying, she had found the cracks. "You can't stay. When this storm ends, you're leaving." "I didn't say otherwise." "That's why we can't—" His voice broke. "I won't survive losing someone again." Her expression shifted, soft, aching, unbearably kind. "You haven't lost me." "Yet," he said. "Everyone leaves. Everyone dies. That's the truth." "No, Jed." She shook her head. "That's your wound talking, not truth." He opened his eyes and regretted it instantly, because she was looking at him with such honesty that he felt the floor shift under him. She lifted a hand, slowly, gently, and touched his cheek. He flinched like the contact burned him, but her hand stayed, warm and soft against his skin. "You saved my life, not just with fire and blankets, with your stubbornness, with your strength, with your heart, even if you pretend it doesn't beat anymore." "Amara." He should have stepped away. Instead, he leaned into her touch. The silence between them thickened, warm as the fire. Then she rose on her toes and brushed her lips against his. It was barely a kiss, just lips meeting, testing. Jed froze. Amara pulled back, not far, just inches. If that was a mistake, say so. He should have. God help me, he should have. Instead, he grabbed her face, rough palms cradling softness, and kissed her hard. The cabin disappeared. The world disappeared. The storm might as well have been a whisper. Every part of him that had been frozen for 15 years surged awake. Her hand slid into his hair. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him. Full curves pressed to his chest, soft and solid and perfect. The kiss deepened, raw, hungry, desperate. When they finally tore apart, both were breathless. He rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he murmured. It already has, she breathed. And he knew, deep in his bones, that nothing would ever be the same again.
Dawn came late, pale and unfriendly, slipping between the clouds like it didn't want to be here. Sharp cold bit at the windows, frosting the glass edges in white lace. Jed Holt didn't sleep. He lay awake on the floorboards, staring at the dying embers, listening to Imara breathe softly from the loft. The memory of her kiss lingered, warm, reckless, alive. A mistake he wanted to make again and again. But he wouldn't. He couldn't. She was leaving soon. He repeated it until the lie felt almost steady. By the time Imara descended the ladder, braids loose, cheeks flushed from sleep, wearing his shirt and trousers like she belonged in them, Jed had already chopped wood, brewed coffee, sharpened his knife, and rebuilt every wall inside himself that last night had torn down. He gave her a curt nod. She gave him a knowing look. They ate in silence. But the world outside wasn't quiet. Thunder stomped in the stable, restless. Jed noticed immediately. The horse didn't spook unless something was wrong. He stood slowly, alert. Stay inside. Imara rose too. Jed, what is it? He didn't answer. His body answered for him, moving to the rifle mounted over the door, checking the chamber with the smooth, deadly familiarity of a man who'd used guns far more often than he wanted to remember. Then he heard it. Hoofbeats. Not the steady thought of one rider, but multiple. 3, maybe 4, making their way up the treacherous mountain path, slow, cautious, determined. Jed stiffened like a struck tree. Men are coming. Imara's breath caught. Who? Only one kind of men climb this high uninvited, the kind meaning trouble. He moved fast, shoved the table aside, positioned himself near the window where he could see without being seen. The riders appeared through the swirling snow. 3 of them. One rode in front on a gray gelding, posture stiff with city refinement. Expensive coat, clean gloves, a man who didn't belong on a mountain. Imara's face drained of color. "Richard," she whispered. Jed turned his head sharply. "You know him?" She swallowed hard. "Richard Peyton, my fiancé, was my fiancé." She corrected herself with quiet venom. Jed's jaw clenched, hard. "He's come to claim you." "No," she said, stepping to his side. "He's come to control me." "Get upstairs," Jed ordered. "I'm not hiding like some damsel in a book. This isn't a game," he snapped. "And I'm not your burden," she snapped back. "I'll stand with you." Their eyes locked, 2 storms meeting. She wasn't frail, wasn't helpless. She was a woman who had already lost everything once and refused to surrender again. Jed exhaled slowly. "Fine. Stay behind me." The riders halted in front of the cabin. Snow swirled around them like a curtain lowering on a stage. The lead rider dismounted, carefully, delicately, and removed his gloves. Richard Peyton was handsome in an artificial way. Groomed, pale, sharp features honed by pride, not hardship. The kind of man who believed the world existed to accommodate him. He knocked once, sharply, as though striking a servant's door. Jed opened it just wide enough to be clear the rifle was in his hands. "Can I help you?" Jed asked, voice cold enough to freeze the wind. Richard offered a tight smile. "I have something that belongs to me." Jed didn't blink. "Nothing in this cabin belongs to you." The smile vanished. "Imara Dubois is my fiancée. Her disappearance has caused complications, debt, scandal. Her father owes me a great deal of money. She was obligated to marry me.
I am here to collect what is mine." Behind Jed, Imara stepped into view. Richard's expression changed. Shock, then anger, then something uglier, entitlement sharpened by humiliation. "Imara," he said sharply, "put on your cloak. We're leaving." She stepped forward, not shrinking, not trembling, chin lifting with strength Jed had only begun to understand. "I'm not going anywhere with you," he said. "You don't have the right to choose." Jed's voice cut in like a blade. "She does." One of Richard's men shifted in the saddle, hand drifting to his holster. Jed's rifle rose a fraction, enough to promise violence. Richard raised a hand to stop his men. "Easy. There's no need for theatrics." Jed's voice was granite. "Your men draw, they die." A tense pause followed, long, cold, breathless. Then Richard fixed his glare on Imara. "You think this mountain man can protect you?" he scoffed. "He can't even protect himself. You know they're looking for him back in Kansas. Murder charges, arson, a man who would burn his own home." "That's a lie," Imara cut in sharply, stepping beside Jed. "You forged those charges." Jed's jaw tightened. He didn't flinch, but the accusations sunk claws into old wounds. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Ungrateful woman. I offered you status, a future. You offered ownership. I'd rather freeze on this mountain than live under your thumb." "You don't know what you're saying," he hissed. "I know exactly what I'm saying." Richard's face twisted. "I will take you back." Jed shifted his stance, ready for the explosion he felt brewing. But Imara beat him to it. With one swift motion, she lifted Jed's second rifle, steady, practiced now, and leveled it at Richard's chest. "You're not taking anything from this cabin," she said, voice calm, deadly, final. The hired men froze. Richard's breath fogged the air in sharp, furious bursts. "You'd choose him?" he spat. "A broken mountain hermit?" "Yes," she said simply. "I choose him. I choose myself. I choose freedom." The words spoken before witnesses hung in the icy air like a verdict. Richard knew it. Jed saw the moment pride cracked in his eyes. "This isn't over," he growled, mounting his horse. "Yes," Imara said, lowering the rifle. "It is." The men turned their horses and began the slow descent. When they disappeared into the swirling white, Jed closed the door and turned to Imara. She shook, not from fear, but from adrenaline, from triumph, from the cost of courage. Jed took the rifle gently from her trembling hands. "You just stood between me and the world," he said quietly. "You would have stood between me and it." Jed cupped her face, slowly, reverently. "You're stronger than you know." She leaned into his touch. "I had to be." And in that quiet, breathless cabin, storm outside, warmth inside, Jed realized something final and irrevocable. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was hers, and she had chosen him.